Financial Planner Life listeners. It's me, Charlie Scott, back again to grace your ears with an exciting conversation today. I'm so excited to have this guest here today. It's been a hot minute since I last jumped on, and when I say hot, I mean extremely hot. We had, some record-breaking days that have passed recently, which I'm sure brings the conversation of the climate to the forefront of your mind, as it does with mine. I read today that I think 8 in 10 people are now very concerned about the climate due to the recent heat waves. So today we've got a very topical conversation with Rebecca Kowalski. Hi, Rebecca. How are you doing?
Hi. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Yes, very excited to bring your conversation to the listeners of the Financial Planner Life today. I think you've got a very unique sort of story arc in terms of your career and how you've got to where you are now, and some really interesting areas of just the life of yourself in financial planning, which align with the climate very strongly. So I guess it's, let's dive in a little bit to who Rebecca Kowalski is. So tell the podcast about yourself, share your story with the listeners.
Okay, so I've worked in financial services for probably somewhere between 25 and 32 years. I'm keeping it vague, a long time. I've kind of fell into financial services. It wasn't a planned career, as I think is the case for many people. I did a degree in modern languages, and I moved to Scotland just after I graduated with my husband, who had a job here. Then our first child came along rather sooner than expected, and I was just looking for any job that would pay a childminder, really, so that I could get out to work, because I'd moved to a country where I didn't know anybody, I didn't have a lot of money. So that was how I ended up in the Scottish financial services industry. And progressed from there. Started off at, just doing administration in a bank, and passed my exams as quickly as I could, and had grand designs to jump straight into advising as quickly as I could, and did manage to get a job for a large firm which had an excellent graduate trainee scheme for advisors. And at that point, I just managed to get in before I was too old for the graduate trainee scheme, which was great. But then, as I alluded to earlier, things haven't always gone quite according to the programme for me. So just after I got that job and was doing really well, actually, on the training scheme as an advisor, baby number 2 and then baby number 3 came along as well, like in really rapid succession, like horrendously, unexpectedly. Not horrendously, but just from a career perspective, it wasn't the ideal planning. So at that point, I just somehow felt like something was telling me that it wasn't time for me to really progress in my career. I now had 3 children under 5. So, wow. I'd kind of took a few months off, and then decided I was going to have to come back part-time for a while. And that was when I then progressed into paraplanning, which at that time, not very many people, even in financial services.
Was paraplanning the name back then?
Yeah, it was actually a friend of mine who I'd worked with, had left the advisor firm that we were both at and gone into being a kind of consultant for an insurance company. And I think she was covering all these different accounts, and she'd heard from one of her accounts this notion of a paraplanner, and she said, somebody's told me they're looking for a paraplanner, that might suit you. I don't think I even knew what it was. So I turned up, and it was fine. It worked perfectly for me at the time. And then I think that particular company, the person who was kind of quite forward thinking and had heard of a paraplanner, and so had recruited me, was that forward thinking that 9 months after decided they didn't want to be a financial advisor at all anymore, and wound up the business. So then I was like, okay, has anybody else heard of paraplanning? Because I've got my children installed in a nursery in this area now, and all the rest of it. But luckily, I think even though the actual name paraplanning was like still causing people to scratch their heads, the notion of what you could add to the business, it was attractive to people, I think. It's mainly small firms that I was working for, or kind of small to medium size as a paraplanner. And I think just people who are not only advising but also directing and running the business, just they really wanted a trustworthy pair of hands that they knew they could come in and kind of trust with getting right in there with the clients and thinking of the solutions and just being like a right hand person, really. For me, that's how paraplanning always was. It wasn't a kind of copy and paste and order quotes kind of role, you know. It was always kind of getting right in and working very closely alongside the advisor and sharing that role. And then I did that for probably the best part of 18 years. I kind of different companies, got all my exams, became chartered, won some awards along the way in paraplanning. But I just got to a stage where I'd kind of done it for so long and I felt like I'd got to the absolute top of it. You know, I was managing other paraplanners as well, which just kind of added to the stress a bit, really, because, you know, you're overseeing more things. And I just kind of, I was just got to that point where I didn't know how to grow or kind of, you know, keep my interest up. I just felt I could do the job kind of asleep, really, or kind of with my hands tied behind my back, and it just wasn't exciting me. So at that point I switched into compliance just because it meant new things to learn, new challenges. And also I was kind of working then it was quite liked that, actually, not only compliance but becoming the T&C supervisor for the advisors. So slightly controversial statement, but having been in paraplanning for so long and had my exams for so long, I've always quietly liked to think that I could, you know, I knew as much and could do as much as the advisors could, you know. So it was quite refreshing to be their supervisor at that point. I mean, I was always a very nice supervisor. I don't think I was a scary one, you know. I was very understanding and encouraging and everything, but it was a new set of skills, and I enjoyed that. So that was the kind of that stage of my career. And then 2018-19 I started getting interested in sustainable investing as a kind of sideline, just one little aspect of the many things that you need to know when you work in financial services. And I can't actually remember how that kind of evolved exactly from, you know, the subject that you would occasionally read an article about if it pinged into your inbox, to something that you literally can't get enough of and are kind of gobbling up every piece of information that you possibly can and trying to kind of push it forward. It was just a gradual process, and I think it evolved because my employers at the time were quite encouraging of that. You know, the more I talked to them about it, the more they were like, okay, we get that this is a kind of, sounds like a really interesting new area of financial services, that it could be really attractive to the clients, that it could allow the firm to differentiate itself. So then managed to kind of find a fund manager that we could work with who was really aligned with our views and very kind of forward thinking. And then we kind of bounced off each other, really, and then ended up building this portfolio which the company really got behind, and it all got really, really exciting. So my daughter is also really it's her main driver as well, kind of climate activism and you know, environmental crisis. That's her, well, she works in that field. You know,
it's daughter, if you don't mind me asking.
Sorry,
how old's your daughter?
How old is she? Sorry, yeah, she's 26.
Same age as me.
Same age as the cops, she likes to say, you know. She's 36 years of
me
Jennifer,
well.
26 years of cops as well, you know. She's hoping that she makes a bit more difference than the cops have done. So.
No, I think it's an interesting age to be in this world, 26, because we've grown up, you know, 10 years ago was when we would, you know, everyone's in school at that age where you have to pick something to do. I'm sure there's people listening who might be at that point of picking which avenue to go down. And when you get taught about the environment when you're 16 and you're there like, wow, why is no one else really passionately like enraged about this? And since I've then obviously grown 10 years since I was 16, and you've got people like Greta Thunberg, you've got so many more youth, the strikes for, like, you know, youth strikes for climate. It's a big conversation. So I feel like, you know, I've studied environmental science, so your daughter's a girl after my own heart, but I think, you know, we'll definitely dive into that story sort of later on in the podcast, because I think it's really how I might have come across you actually on LinkedIn, was when you connect with people in the sort of sustainable finance space, and you can see what they're sharing. There was a photo which you'd shared, and I think it was outside the courtrooms.
Oh yeah, that was a bad photo.
Yeah,
because looking very stressed.
And it was a really, I was like, wow, this is someone who, you know, anyone who's listening who speaks to me during my day job as a recruiter knows that I operate within Scotland, and that's my area. So when I saw someone who works in financial planning's child is a climate activist and they've been arrested and they're, you know, Scotland, and I thought this is something really rare in the industry that I've never seen. You know, I think in the industry, as far as I'm aware, the conversation has definitely changed. It's definitely heated up, as so has the planet, into really bringing attention into these issues. And that's really why, you know, this space on the Financial Planner Life, and thank you so much for coming on and really diving into it, because people who are changing the industry and challenging things that have just always been done a certain way. Why is it done that way? Why can't it be done this way, which is slightly better? And challenging that status quo is how the positive change and the positive force can evolve from this.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. And I try and do that kind of at an acceptable rate within my business. You know, I don't think I can kind of just, you know, jump on a podcast or jump onto social media and say, you know, you've got to stop doing this now. You must, you know, there's a certain kind of tone and a certain kind of pace that's, you know, that people can deal with. But I just think, you know, I've worked in the industry a long time. I've gained a lot of experience, qualifications, you know, contacts and things like that. So if I can just use that to kind of still look like a normal financial services person, but just kind of tweak it and push it and adapt it a little bit, and just I think, I don't know if it is because I have 3 children who are in their kind of 20s, but I just kind of enjoy young people's company and their way of thinking. And I think there is a risk for people who are in their 50s like me, that they get very kind of comfortable and relaxed, and they just think, well, we're fine now, we'll just see our days, you know, until retirement or whatever, you know. And for me, I'm just not like that. I'm kind of like, what else can I fix before, you know, while I've still got time, what else can I do today, kind of thing. And it's really nice to see young people doing well in the industry. I always, you know, I really have enjoyed mentoring some young people in my career. And you know, if their views and their different ways of doing things can be given a proper voice and really listened to, and you know, they get the opportunity to, you know, just not kind of tear everything down overnight, but inject some of their own thinking into it, and that's a really healthy thing for the industry. So
absolutely. Absolutely. And so from your journey of, you know, power planning through into compliance, T's and C's manager, you started to gain more momentum in pursuing sustainable finance and looking at the force for good that finance can really hold. And that's brought you to where you are now. So just dive into where you are now in terms of your business.
Yeah, okay, because I guess I've kind of, I told you what I've been doing, but not really quite how I ended up where I am now. So I set up my business about a year ago, and it kind of came from a kind of spontaneous emotional place, really. I am quite an emotional person, I guess I have to admit. But I've been working for my former employer for 7 years, and everything was going great, you know, great company, great bunch of people. And as I say, I've been getting more and more involved in helping them develop their sustainable investment proposition. And particularly during lockdown, because obviously everything went a little bit strange during lockdown. Nobody quite knew how the working day was going to be and things like that. So right at the start, when everybody thought that maybe, you know, business as usual would just completely not function, we were all given projects to keep us busy while we were working from home. And one of my colleagues and I launched a podcast. We were interviewing people about everything to do with sustainability, like people in the industry and people just kind of in science, academics, people with sustainable businesses, things like that. And then we started working on the notion to launch a brand new independent sustainable investment proposition that would sit alongside the company, and kind of thinking about all the ideas of what the service would look like, what the branding would be like. Really, really exciting stuff. And obviously during lockdown, you couldn't really do anything else. You couldn't go on holiday, you couldn't go out, you know, so that really became our work, our hobby. everything. There was an awful lot of Zoom conversations going on about that at all hours. So and then the business got taken over, like not unexpectedly. It kind of, the takeover was planned, but there was a change of direction at that point. So the sustainable proposition was kind of put on the back burner, really kind of dampened down quite a lot. And at that point, after all the kind of time that had been invested in it, for all hours, weekends and everything over lockdown, I just wasn't ready to rein it in, really, and to kind of remove focus and energy from it. So at that point, I just thought, right, okay, how do I take what I've learned and, the kind of development and the skills and the interest that I have in this area now and put that to good use? I can't just switch it off. It's not possible. So how can I find a way of staying in financial services, making use of my experience, but, shining that light onto sustainable investing as much as I possibly can and being worthwhile. I think the main thing you want to do really is you want to use everything that you've learned and actually apply it so that it achieves something, whether it's not so much whether it's for my own benefit, but just that somebody appreciates it and it kind of makes a difference, whether it's clients who end up getting access to a portfolio that they wouldn't have before, or a business that feels confident to actually embrace doing that kind of investment and they didn't feel they had the skills or the knowledge before. Just anything to feel that you've actually done your bit and achieved something,
So. And in terms of the business at the moment, Overstory is the name.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask, what was the reasoning for that name? Because I love, obviously, ecologically speaking, you do have those layers of a forest. You've got the understory, you've got all the different canopy layers, and then the overstory is the outermost layer, if I'm correct, isn't it, of a forest?
Yeah. I love that you know what it means. I really do. That really makes me happy. Somebody once told me, I spoke to somebody about the name once and they were like, oh, I love that name, but they didn't know that it meant the kind of canopy of the forest. They just thought it was great because it had the word story in it and it's about telling a story from a marketing point of view kind of thing. And I was like, well, yeah, fair enough. But there is another meaning to it as well. So yeah, there is a bit of a story to the name Overstory, actually. So, when we were thinking of a brand for my former employer's sustainable investment proposition, we had a list of about 20 different names. And, I had sent out surveys to all my friends to which one of these names do you like? So if anybody else wants a name for a sustainable investment brand, I've got another 19, Hit
Rebecca up.
But what we did find is that we couldn't find one single name that consistently everybody liked. We'd kind of got it down to kind of, so women of a certain age tend to like this one, and but we couldn't find one that was like the eureka moment. And I don't suppose that exists really. I don't suppose there's any brand name that everybody instantly goes, oh well, that's just what I would have chosen. That's fantastic. So we got to the point where choosing a name was the most problematic thing. It was like you were lying in bed at night trying to think of this name that just captured everything that you were dreaming about and envisaging. But it's actually my husband who came up with it in the end out of sheer desperation. He came home from work one night and was like, what are you looking grumpy about? And I was like, I still can't think of a name for my and he picked up this book that was like on the desk next to him and said, well, name it after this book. And it was the book Overstory. And the minute that, because he'd read that and I said, right, okay, well, let me read the book first. Let me check if it's appropriate for me to name my business after it. And it is the most appropriate book to name an environmentally focused business on. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a fantastic book. It's all about trees. It's all about people who have relationships with trees. It's like a series of short stories of all these different people who somehow a particular tree is really relevant in their life, and then later on in the book they all kind of come together because they all join this kind of environmental action group and try and kind of save the trees that are being cut down and it's a brilliant book. It's full of really great quotes and it really makes you think, and it's about people who are really prepared to kind of change their lives and put nature first. And I haven't done anything as radical as anybody in that book has, but I think I've done a little bit of something along those lines, by setting up the business, by you know, kind of reducing my hours, you know, taking a cut in salary and, you know, cutting out commuting, all that kind of thing. I've definitely kind of reduced my own carbon footprint and also kind of created some positive impact as well. You know,
absolutely. So. Yeah, it's impact of a business is something which, you know, the Financial Planner Life is home at Recruit UK, which is where I work, and we've recently had to go through the process of B Corp. And we've hit submit on our application, so really fingers crossed it will probably come through in the next 6 months. But to actually look at your business and the impact you can have, obviously, you know, in the industry you get ESG thrown around a lot, you know, look at your environment, your social, your governance, but it kind of goes beyond that, you know, having the G at the end. It should I think I've heard people say it should be at the beginning, looking at the governance, because that relates to the social and that then falls into the environmental, and really looking at the impact of your business. I think, you know, there was a few companies going through the process with us as a company, and it was individuals like yourself where it's, you know, a one-man band, one-woman band who really has to try and grow this up organically. And then you get businesses who, you know, I know Coots Bank is B Corp. I can't even imagine the process they had to go through, looking at everything and reassessing the impact of that. So props to Coots for putting that fine-tooth comb through the business. And so with Overstory then, in a nutshell, try and describe to the listeners what it is that you provide as a service.
Well, it is quite varied up till now. I'm just coming up to a year, as I said earlier, and I am, you know, one of my projects when I cross that first year's point is I'm going to kind of reflect and review and maybe try and kind of focus it a bit more, because I've been doing so many different things that it's quite difficult to kind of scale it and to kind of, you know, to be consistent. And I'm learning one thing one week and another thing the next week. But basically the things I've been doing so far is, I guess, is a little bit of kind of hands-on kind of client consultancy work. That's, I guess, the main part of it, really. Then there's been a lot of kind of advocacy and education work. So, I mean, you know, I write a lot of articles and I'm on social media a lot, just trying to kind of keep the message out there and get people thinking about the issues. And then also I'm just kind of trying to improve how sustainable investment is done in financial services as a whole, really, I suppose. I mean, obviously I'm only one person, there's a limit to what you can do, but the more conversations I've been having, the connections I've been making, the kind of opportunities are opening up now to get involved in some really interesting projects. So kind of, you know, writing educational materials for advisors and training and things like that. So going forward, there'll probably be more of that. But the clients that I've been working with, they've all been very different. So they've all come to me, you know, saying, I need some help with my sustainable investing. How do I get started on it? And, you know, their problems or their kind of hurdles that they want to remove have been very different for every single one of them, you know. So it's been everything from helping them to pick what type of funds they might want to use and how they explain them to clients, to just tell me how to have a conversation about this stuff. I don't know where to start. I don't know what I know, you know, what I can get away with knowing and not knowing. And kind of, you know, one or two of my larger clients, it's kind of, I guess I'm going on the journey with them, and it kind of like it's a monthly retainer type arrangement. So I'm helping them start from scratch and then build up a sustainable proposition over an amount of time, which is where it gets kind of tricky, really, because there's a wide variety of aspects to look at, you know, and I think to do it really, really well, you have to be a bit like a B Corp process and consider it through all aspects of your business, you know. How do you relate this to your clients? How do you get your staff on board and excited about it? How do you make sure you've got the right resources and training? You know, it's not something you can just pick a portfolio off the shelf and go, there, I've done that now, that's my sustainable proposition. That you know, it ticks the box, that's what that does, but it doesn't really make it come to life, you know. So
no, 100%. I think with the environmental things as well, as ticking of a box in some ways is a great way to look at it, but also it's not as simple as that. Ticking the box. It's something where it's critical. it needs the conversation. There's so much to talk about. And once you really dive into it, and I'm sure particularly within the world of investments, you actually start looking at all the different portfolios that you can build together, it becomes a very convoluted, complex topic. So you must almost guide people through the noise, because there is so much noise on socials, like particularly LinkedIn. There's a lot of, I guess, people ticking that box for their own marketing, you know, to put out some article about this and an article about that, but to really help educate individuals, because you've been in the industry, you know, you've been within financial planning, you've lived, you've walked in the shoes of people who have, you know, put together the suitability reports. So to be able to then share the knowledge that you've pursued yourself and tie that up with how it's relative to them is a really useful resource. And I guess, you know, climate can sometimes be a contentious topic. I've definitely butted heads with my own dad and my stepdad about, I'm pretty sure my stepdad, bless his heart, said, oh, by the time it gets to being a problem, I won't be here. And I'm like, okay, what about the next generation? And have you come up against any barriers like that within your conversations, not necessarily with clients, but just generally in terms of trying to put the message out there that you've got? Have you come across much friction?
I think I have the same kind of conversations with myself, the same worries about this that anybody who is concerned about climate change and the environment has, you know, to all of us who care about this worry about it and think about how we're going to get everybody else engaged. But I don't know if it comes with a certain kind of age that I'm kind of, you know, as you get older, I think you get a little bit more understanding and a bit more patient with people, you know, whereas like when you're younger, you're kind of like, you know, I see it with my daughter, you want change and you want change now. And the people who don't get it, you know, they're kind of like the enemy. And, you know, it's just that natural thing with teenagers fighting against their parents and stuff like that. And as you get older, you get a little bit more kind of, okay, let's think about this. How can we approach it? Let's try and walk in their shoes, you know, because it's not just in my work, but just kind of conversations I have with people all around me. I sometimes think, you know, why are they all kind of so interested in what they watched on telly last night? And, you know, nobody's that interested in this, you know, but then you just have to understand, I think, that until you kind of get into this space that you're in, until you've got that realization, you are in a kind of different world. It's like two kind of worlds walking alongside each other. And then as soon as you kind of open up the lid and you start getting concerned about the crisis, and the more you find out about it, the more concerned you get. But you just, I don't think anybody has the answer yet, because if we had the answer, we wouldn't have the problem of how to get everybody on board with taking action. I'm very much of the opinion, kind of remembering where I was like 20 years ago when my kids were small, that when you're a parent, you've got young children, yes, you should be really, really worried because you want, you know, your children's future to be secure. But at the same time, you're just running around trying to make sure that their shoes fit and they've eaten their vegetables and they've done their homework and they make it to Brownies on time. And, you know, I wasn't really
you're focusing on
thinking about world issues when I was at that stage of my life, you know. So I kind of feel like those of us that have some capacity to put more time and thought into it have to step up and do that, you know, and just wait for our moment, you know. So I know that if I kind of went on and on at the average person about climate change as much as I could, they'd probably not want to hang out with me anymore. You know? Yeah, you have to choose your moment, and you have to kind of you know, every now and then kind of put a bit of banter into the conversation or something. And then, you know, every now and then you might get a chance to kind of just chip in the conversation with something that's a bit more meaningful, you know. But yeah, it's quite a difficult one. But I don't approach my professional work with the view that I can convert everybody into a climate activist who wants to kind of help solve world hunger and things like that. You know, I'm kind of realistic about the human condition, and you know, we are all a little bit, you know, obsessed with ourselves and, you know, what we're doing today and tomorrow, and don't think about the bigger picture. We don't really maybe have time to do that all the time. So I see my role as trying to encourage everybody, no matter what makes them want to do something sustainable, you know, no matter what their motivation is and how hard and fast they want to go. If you can make them go a bit harder and a bit faster, and whether they're doing it from really kind of moral reasons, or if they're doing it because they think it's another source of kind of income for their business. I still want them to do it. I still want to be part of that, because to me, that's kind of the approach that I've chosen to take. I mean, in 2 years I might change my mind and go and join the people protesting on the motorway, who knows, but right now that's where I think I can add the most value.
No, absolutely. I love that approach as well. It's a huge credit to your emotional intelligence on it, and really being able to see the individuals before you and understand that different perspectives. One thing I remember studying through my degree with environmental science is it's a multidisciplinary issue, climate crisis. It's not just for the biologists and the geologists and the psychologists and the sociologists. It's also for the politics and the economy and finance, and it's absolutely everything can be involved within that. And whilst you said there, when you have the ability to use your time for this matter, there could be somebody listening who might think, I just don't have the time for that, because like you said, you could be raising a family, you could be starting a business from scratch, and everyone has a different perspective that they're coming from, which doesn't necessarily have the climate crisis at the front of their mind, because they could be thinking of, how am I putting food on the table tonight? How am I, going to pay for the rent next month, particularly in the world we live in at the moment with the, climate crisis and a cost of living crisis. I think it's very easy to get caught up in the noise. And I think having an individual like yourself, where you recognize it is in a way privilege, and I think I recognize my own privilege in being able to sit here and talk about this with you, is that we are in a position to be able to champion and raise awareness. And you never know, something that we discussed today could spark an idea. It could inspire somebody who's maybe sat looking to get into financial planning and thinks, I'm going to go down the sustainable route. Or somebody could be sat there going, I really want to reassess what our sustainable proposition is, because there is a time on this, there is a time on the climate crisis, and it's so easy to get anxious about it. But I really think it's about empowering people and showing them that, anything is possible. At some point, COVID felt like it was a nightmare that we were never going to escape, and it was very all encompassing. But we created, all sorts of measures and implements, and the society is pretty much back to a new version of what it was before. And I do genuinely believe, they've got an enzyme that they've created that eats plastic, that there are scientists working behind this. And I think within finance, that cog is turning now. And I think for you as well, is through your career of financial planning, how has the conversation changed? 20 years ago, was it even on people's lips? Were people actually discussing, the planet's got really warm and the ice caps might melt?
No, I mean, from memory, I think the first, you got the occasional client who was ethical, so you'd have religious clients who wanted to exclude things, and it's kind of clear from everything about their lifestyles that they would want to kind of match their investments to that, but they were very, very few and far between, and the options available to them were very, very limited, so the industry has developed so much. I mean, it's still developing, but even I would say only in the last 2 years really that you can really properly, across all aspects of your portfolio, properly diversify it and have different strategies and different asset classes that are thinking about sustainability as a factor. And that gives us great opportunity, because one of the things that ever since with my former employer we introduced the sustainable option was that we wanted to make sure that the clients who chose that were not in any way disadvantaged over clients who didn't, so they didn't have to accept more risk or pay higher costs or move to a different product, that they had that choice, and that it was a level playing field, apart from the fact that they wanted to choose to kind of aim towards a different kind of future with their portfolio, I suppose, because I mean, everything that we invest in is long term and is for the future, but it's just kind of imagining what that future is going to be like, basically, which vision of a future do you want to invest in, but I still think that as much as, there are all these surveys coming out saying, 70% of clients want to invest sustainably, the numbers differ, but the general message is the same. And there's a new survey every week. But I still think that the majority of clients don't yet have the confidence to come into a room and see a financial advisor and say, I want this. They're still waiting to be told what they can have. And I think that's where the advisors who really want to take this seriously can kind of skill up in that area. It's not going to be that hard. You just have to be honest with your clients and tell them that that this is a new area for you, that it's changing all the time, that none of us can be experts in all aspects of it, but just kind of have an engaged conversation, find out what they know, because increasingly, I think a lot of clients are going to be coming across sustainability in other walks of their life. So, they might be able to educate you on one aspect of it. They might be experts on, I don't know, renewable energy or fast fashion or something like that. And they can teach you more than you know on that aspect of the portfolio. But your role is still to tell them how that fits into their overall investment framework and their risk and their financial planning and things like that. So I think it can create a more equal conversation between advisors and clients, which I think is a great thing. I think one of the things that sustainable investing kind of sheds a light on really is the whole dynamic between advisors and clients and financial services really as a whole, like the terrible habits we have of speaking in a language that clients don't understand, and the more that we can try and address that across the board as part of the sustainable investment exercise, the better. Which it fits in very well with the consumer duty paper that the FCA's brought out. I think if you read that, you can really apply some of the kind of expectations that's placing on advisors, that the kind of doing sustainable investing well will really kind of fulfill consumer duty expectations. So I think hopefully it's a sign. The FCA actually seems really on board with climate change, which is quite refreshing. People see the FCA as an organisation that makes things more difficult. Sometimes it's necessary that it does that, but I do actually think it is really trying to enable sustainable investment. So maybe taking a little bit longer, but that's just the nature of a complex situation, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely every business in the world, particularly in the UK, every single business is going to have to look at what they're doing. No one's going to be able to escape it. Even here as a recruitment company, we don't have a supply chain, we don't have massive ongoing behind the scene processes. We talk to people, we talk to our clients, and that's it. But still within that, we have to address what we're doing. And I think there's a few, financial planning firms, there are a few, I see some popping up and being B Corp. There's a lot more into the impact investing. There's a lot more attention into what your pensions can do. And I think the awareness from a client perspective is definitely being raised, because the conversation is everywhere, particularly even in the news with the heat waves at the moment. People probably didn't think the effects of climate change were going to land on our shores as soon as they did, but the fires that happened down in Kent a few weeks ago really, awful new thing to see on the news. I was away in Barcelona and I was like, wow, the UK's burning, which is kind of crazy to imagine that it would happen now. It's almost like watching the day after tomorrow. It's on our doorstep and it's here, and acting is, we should have been talking about this a lot sooner. But I guess as well, working in this side of the industry and looking at sustainability, it can get a bit dark sometimes, I find, because you are talking about it's not the end of the world, but you're pushing for this change to happen. And do you ever find that it, in terms of a mental health perspective of your job, how does it impact on your mental health? Do you find, because climate anxiety is a thing,
I know, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I see it very firsthand in my daughter. The route that she's chosen to take with her life is not an easy choice, and I don't think I don't know if at some point she might be able to make the choice to kind of take some of that pressure off of herself and not feel personally obliged to try and kind of fix the world's problems. But for me, I think because I've aligned this interest of mine and this kind of mission, if you want to call it that, of mine to my work,
Yeah.
And I see it as a professional opportunity and a professional challenge, and really exciting. Like, it's made financial services much more exciting for me than it ever has been before. It's pretty positive for me. I mean, the only thing that stresses me really is trying to keep on top of it all, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I like to think I want to kind of be a total expert in this, but there's just not enough hours in the day really. And because it's just me by myself, I think, oh God, if I had an assistant and I could get them to go and do that bit, but so that's kind of what stresses me out. But yeah, it does get dark. And my daughter struggles with it. I think it can be quite isolating. She does have friends, that very close group of friends. They're all very supportive of each other, who she's met through her environmental activities. But before that, she'd had to leave jobs because she didn't feel that she was kind of, in line with the rest of the people in the office. She had a relationship breakup because her partner thought she was taking it too seriously. So it is tough. It does isolate you from people if you take it seriously enough. And she has genuinely felt for a long time that this is, that dark place that you refer to. She does literally, that dark place does keep her awake at night.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to joke about it with her, because she'd be reading some of these kind of climate books, the science that's telling you about all the worst case scenarios, what's going to happen. We were coming back from a night out on a Glasgow bus one night, and she picked out one of her climate change books and started reading the 50 worst deaths as a result of climate change or something like that. And I was like, Jennifer, it's 11 o'clock on a Glasgow bus on a Friday night. People don't really want to be
break.
here.
Read the room, read the bus.
Yeah, but yeah, she does take it quite hard. So yeah, I do know that climate anxiety is a reality.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm still in that place where I'm like, okay, we've got a problem. What can we do to fix it? I'm not kind of in that place where I'm like, either I want to just run away from it and give up, or I'm despairing that nothing can be done.
Yeah.
So,
no, definitely.
Yeah.
And would you say as well, with your daughter, was she a big inspiration into stepping into the side of the industry? Do you feel, as the financial planner life, we try to think of every area of someone's life within financial planning, and that includes family, that includes who we are when we're not, standing forward in the professional space we are. And I think, to have a parent who would shift their career into being in the sustainable avenue, it must be a comfort to her for sure, and it must be quite inspiring on both levels to be like, wow, look at my mum go, and also be like, look at my daughter go.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder if she thinks, this is my subject, mum, back off. But it's like she's been a really mad Taylor Swift fan all her life. And when she first started loving Taylor Swift, I used to get really annoyed at the amount of money I had to spend on concert tickets and merchandise. But then eventually I kind of caught on too and started going to the concerts with her. And I'm like, she's just going to think that I just eventually copy on and copy everything that she does. But no, I think it was a combination, really. I mean, there's two things. There's one that I just love a project. In financial services all my life, I've loved to get my teeth into the really big projects. So, over the years, it's been like the how to give good defined benefit transfer advice. You can't get much more complicated than that. That was one thing that I got really engrossed in. And then before that, there was maybe when they changed all the pensions legislation, or they changed, they brought in a whole new load of compliance rules. And I like a kind of project to really plow into all that stuff and figure out how to roll it out and things like that. So I like it for that reason, because there is just so much to know about it and so much to teach other people about and things. But also, I've always been in financial services for my kids, whether it's to pay their nursery fees, whether it's to give them money to spend, that's always the reason why I've worked in financial services. And, now that they're older and they don't, I'm sure they'd probably take all my money if I let them, but they've got their own jobs now. They're not as financially dependent on me. How else can I help them? And when my daughter turns around to me and says, and I always thought she'd be a fantastic mum because she's that kind of a girl. Mum, I don't think I want to have kids now because I don't think it would be a fit place to bring them into. And I'm thinking of, maybe being a granny one day and realizing, oh, well, actually, maybe that's not a choice I have now. You've got to think about what else you can do, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely. And I think, there's a lot of people within the industry where we speak, you speak to people about their lives and you talk about future planning and you think about grandkids and the way life will go. And I think it just goes to show that already individuals are not going to take that sort of typical route because of climate, because of their concerns with the climate. And I think that just brings more power into being able to help where we can, being able to campaign and speak loud and take up space and inspire and share the science and really lift up the message. Because if we can just help this alleviate this a little bit more, you never know what's going to happen, where we could be in 10 years time. And I guess one question I did definitely want to ask is, there are so many people that listen on this podcast, and it really ranges from individuals who, might have a paraplanner who has been in the industry for 20 years and was like, yes, I know the woes of being a paraplanning manager, like you said. But we also have people who listen who might not even, they might be just doing their first RO exam for their level 4 diploma. And what would you give as advice for somebody who was looking to get into the industry but wants to step into the sustainable side of the industry?
Okay, well, I mean, at the moment probably the fund management side has more avenues. I mean, I think that may change because advisors will start integrating sustainability more into their businesses, and particularly, as FCA regulation comes out along those lines. At the moment, there's probably more options in the fund management side, because obviously the fund managers are, even the ones who aren't necessarily putting a sustainable badge, everybody's doing ESG to some extent behind the scenes. I guess it just depends on whether that attracts you, that more kind of analytical research type work, or if you do prefer more kind of being among people, client facing, that kind of thing. I think there will be a great need for client facing skills in the sustainability space. I mean, personally, I quite like the idea of, if you've got a young person in the office who's kind of motivated about climate change or any kind of sustainable issues, social issues, and they're training, aiming to be an advisor at some point, get them into the meeting to do the conversation about the sustainable piece. The advisor can supervise it and still top it and tail it to make sure it's compliant and everything. But there's nothing, the single best ingredient for doing sustainability well is enthusiasm. When I, at my previous employers, they'd occasionally drag me into meetings, even though it wasn't an official client facing role, just to chat about our sustainable investment portfolios. And I'd kind of go over 15 minutes and go, yeah, they're great, and then, the client and the advisor would go, oh my goodness, that was, I've never heard anybody talk about anything so enthusiastically before. And it people are not immune to that, if they pick up on it. So that's one thing. But I think, whatever route you get into, like my experience over the years for any way of advancing yourself and kind of getting yourself noticed or taken seriously, is to pick a subject that you're really enthusiastic about, whether that be sustainability or something else, and just go out of your way to make yourself the expert in the office on it, because people will soon notice that, and then just kind of start talking about it and answering the questions or giving the tips that nobody else can give, and it gets you noticed, whether it means you get a promotion or a pay rise or just a pat on the back. But it's definitely the best way, I think, to kind of differentiate yourself. Obviously you've got past exams as well, but just enthusiasm and that kind of dedication to a subject so that you become the real expert on it is definitely the way to go, I would say.
No, thank you for that. I agree. It's pull up a chair to the table for yourself, create that space for yourself. And I think what you said there, enthusiasm and becoming an expert, it brings so much more sort of tangible value to what you're giving. Definitely good advice there. And I think to anyone listening as well, if you've got any questions about sustainability, you can find both Rebecca and myself on LinkedIn. Do reach out, particularly if you found something in this episode really helpful. That will round up our episode for today, Rebecca, and I'm so grateful for you coming on here, sharing your message, sharing your mission, giving nuggets of wisdom to the listeners today. And again, I think it's always great when people just speak into the space of sustainability and challenge that status quo, and, you know, push for change, because this is something which can't wait. It can't wait. So thank you so much. Thank you for coming on here today. Okay. And I'll speak to you all soon, Financial Planner Life. Thank you very much, and bye now. Bye.